when people move into the city, when you have urbanization, then you just don't have as many farmers. And so you have to find new ways to grow more food with fewer farmers. And that ends up this treadmill where it starts to create new problems like soil losing its health properties. So you add the fertilizer back into the soil with chemicals, and then you have to manage all the pests. So you add the pesticides back in with the chemicals. If food doesn't have its nutrients, well, you can fortify it. You can add back in the nutrients, and you can take a supplement or you can take a vitamin, and it changes the equation of why you're growing the food. So you want to create more higher quantity, a bigger yield, a bigger harvest. Like these are all technocratic values. They're not humanistic, because humans are messy and they can't, efficiency is a tricky thing.
Welcome to the podcast, Telar Maestro. I'm happy today to be joined by Benjamin R. Cohen. He's a historian, environmental studies and science and technology studies scholar, and also he's the co-host of the internet's only undefeated podcast about small college life, various bread and butters. Academically, his research fits at the intersection of history of science, technology, and the environment, with particular attention to industrial and sustainable agriculture. Thank you for being here, Benjamin.
Yes, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Um, I'm interested in your research because, as I told you earlier, I was checking on the internet several of the articles you wrote and contributed, and I've been interested in the topic of nutrition in food agriculture because it seems that in the last years, it seems to 40 years, it seems I saw a research or a documentary that it was pointed at around 30% of nutrients have been lost of several key items that you can find in, I mean, vegetables, especially specifically. And I'm wondering what are the causes of this problem, and yeah, what is your point of view of this?
Um, First of all, thank you for asking. It's a good question. I think it's of no surprise to anybody listening. It is a complicated question. I won't have a singular answer, but I can speak about the topic. I should say that I, I come to the topic and the question of nutrition and health as an environmental historian. So I start on the ground and I start in the soil. And my main understanding historically of how our food's nutrition has changed. And I would say not just the last 40, 50, 60 years, but the last 100, 200 years has been strongly influenced by the way that we work the soil and work the land. So, um, for those who advocate organic agriculture, um, which is a movement that grows in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, and it's somewhat odd looking back because all agriculture was that for, thousands of years. So to have to come up with a new way to do something that we've always been doing and then give it a different name is a little strange. But what's now called conventional agriculture was not conventional at all at the time. It was the new thing. So it gained the term conventional pretty quickly because it was larger scale, higher yield, more acreage, more throughput, more input. It's more intense, and so conventional agriculture, which in the U.S. we would call big ag, big agriculture, like capital B, capital A, changes how we treat the land so that we can grow the food. And somewhat to end this setup to the answer, this ends up changing the nutrients in the soil and the health properties that come from growing food in healthy soil that ends up changing how we eat the food. Um, I start by thinking of some of those organic pioneers, not because they were flawless. I think there was a lot of work that they still had to do, but the science that they were doing to understand organic properties of the earth in the 40s and 50s. I'm thinking of people like Lady Eve Balfour, who was in England, and near where I live in the US, in Pennsylvania, was a guy, J.I. Rodale, who wrote a lot about this. And they had a straightforward equation that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. So the nutrition question, I hope that wasn't a roundabout way to say it, but to get to the actual answer to the question, the nutritional changes go back to the soil. Healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people. Then to have healthy people, you need to have healthy soil so you can grow healthy food. Um, I'll say too that at the same time, the so-called organic pioneers were not doing anything that people already knew and were doing all over the world for centuries. There are widespread global practices from any number of farming communities and strong cultures, indigenous cultures, all cultures that already understood that equation. It's not like they came up with something that people didn't already know. They just codified it in a different way, and they were arguing against the big ag, capital B, capital A version, which they thought undermine that equation that healthy soil equals healthy food equals healthy people, so that we started down this path of having our food's nutritional quality diminished.
Yeah. So as I understand, the now standard agriculture try to solve the problem of how we can make more food, and it seems that kind of solve that problem in many ways, and that's the big argument that okay, we are solving the problem of taking out of poverty people by providing more food, more supplies, and also sources, but the nutrition side was like not taken into consideration, any
Right.
carb or any calorie is not the same as healthy calorie.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's true. There's a because I mentioned that I come at this as an environmental historian. I also come at it from studies of a field called science and technology studies, which is for listeners a way to try to understand the history and the philosophy and the sociology and the politics of science and technology. So basically, like, how does technology work? It's not just you invent it and there you have it. It's like, well, what funding, what research agenda, which people, what kind of experiments are you doing? Where are you publishing? Who listens? Who's paying for it? There's a lot of questions around what makes a technology work. And one thing that comes to mind from your point is what we call the technological fix, which is coming up with a scientific or technological solution to a problem because some scientific or technological issue caused the problem. So in this case, when you get bigger farms, monocrop fields, one crop per field, um, you undermine the land's chance to regenerate itself and fix nitrogen and provide healthy soil. So you've created one problem, which is now you don't have healthy soil. But then you just like invent fertilizer that you make in a factory and you add it back to the land. So you come up with this technological fix, and you can never get off that treadmill. Like then you have to get the pesticides because now you're creating more pests because the plants don't have their natural defenses. Then you're using more water because these are very energy water intensive seeds. So you've got to add the fertilizer, you've got to add the pesticide, you've got to add the herbicide, you've got to add more irrigation. Then you have to have bigger tractors to manage these fields. It's not like the some stereotype of like this romantic idea that we're all just out there with a horse on a plow, which hasn't really been a common one in big industrialized countries for a very long time, if ever. But is common across the world in smallholder agricultural regimes, people who work outside that big ag system. So we do end up in the 20th century, I mean, generically, like the global powers or industrial powers, that's the we, get really good at producing a lot of food because we have a lot of people, and because fewer people are farming, now you need to make a lot more food per farm because there's not as many of us producing the food. And that ends up this treadmill where it starts to create new problems like soil losing its health properties And so you add the fertilizer back into the soil with chemicals, and then you have to manage all the pests. So you add the pesticides back in with the chemicals, and then you have to operate these larger and larger fields. And so you pump your tractors full of gasoline and oil. It's all oil. And here we are, a good 150 years later, and it's very difficult to imagine how to get off that treadmill if you're invested in that big scale issue. And because of that, the same logic. If food doesn't have its nutrients, well, you can fortify it. You can add back in the nutrients, right? Like you can take a supplement, or you can take a vitamin, or those are all possible. Like we can do that. You can say, like, I don't know, it's not a bad thing, right? We figured out how to do that, but it's a solution to a problem that we also
Yes,
created.
that makes sense.
So it's kind of tricky. Like it's not bad to have supplements and to have fortified foods and to have vitamins. I don't see that as like a negative thing, but um, it's only a solution to a problem that we just created. So maybe don't create the problem in the
Yeah,
first
it's,
place.
it's crazy. Just it's like we are taking out the complexity that evolved in nature, and then we're trying to outsource that complexity, and then trying to solve it with complexity on our own that we don't have. I mean, maybe the knowledge to fix that complexity that was already evolved. But I want. I mean, the argument from a big agriculture is okay. We are solving the issue of starvation. Is that really true, or I mean, that is.
I don't think so. The assumption of that claim is that the reason people are hungry is because there's not enough
Mhm.
food. It's a quantity issue. It's a production issue. That's the claim. But there's just so much research that the problems are about distribution. Like we have the food, it just doesn't get to the people who need it. So I was just for other work I was doing, I was rereading a book from 1971 called Diet for a Small Planet by an author woman named Frances Moore Lappé. This is LAPPE, widespread, like in English language reading, I think globally, like bestseller, millions and millions of copies. It's, the 10th anniversary edition, the 20th anniversary edition, the 50th anniversary edition. And she very well made the point back in like 1971 that these are questions of democracy and distribution. They're not questions of production. She was worried about like how are we going to feed everybody. In the 1960s, there was a huge increase in concern over the population boom. There's a book called The Population Bomb that was written in 1968, which kind of freaked out and scared everybody in the Western world, like, oh no, the population is too much. We're not going to have enough food. Which even then, in 1968, was a return to some argument from the late 1700s by Robert, Robert, forget his first name, if it's Thomas or Robert. Malthus was the name. Malthusian concerns. I don't know how if everybody has that reference of Malthusian concerns, if there's too
Yes.
many people and there's not enough food.
I mean, uh,
So
it's
all
been brought
those,
out to movies now
yeah,
by
go ahead.
Avengers. Basically, the idea of Thanos trying to destroy the population because if there's
Yeah.
too many people, I guess this is
Oh,
cheap philosophy. I guess.
yeah, right. Well, so all of it is premised on the assumption that people are hungry because there's not enough food. Um, Too many people have noted that that's the argument made by Big Ag, but it doesn't hold up to the evidence. Not only did Francis Moore Lappé provide a pretty strong argument that was very compelling to so many readers, and it was well backed by evidence that it's about distribution, it's not about production. We have plenty of food. But then, even 10 years after her, the Indian economist Amartya Sen, Sen, like he won a Nobel Prize for helping explain where famine comes from and where hunger comes from, using in many ways a very similar understanding that it was about distribution. It's about power, who controls food flows, who controls the storage of grains and foods like that. Less than like how much is there. So we have we have oh, lots of food. If you think of the big ag model, most of the grain, like think of corn, in the US, like most of it doesn't go to food. Like a significant portion of it goes to feed animals, and then maybe the animals become food eventually, but that's a very inefficient way to get from a crop to our nutrition. Like if we're eating corn that went through a pig and then we ate the pig, you're going to lose nutrition along the way, and then we're just eating meat. So that's one big chunk of the pie. Like the food's not even being grown for us to eat. So don't tell me that we don't have enough when you're just wasting it. A big percentage of it is going to like ethanol or for fuel. Like it's not for eating. Like so much of our food is not made for eating. And then so much more of that corn is just going into like corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup. So you see it in every product on the shelves in a conventional grocery store. And your prompt, whatever, 15 minutes ago about health, um, that's not very healthy food. So we took corn and then we turned it into corn syrup and then we turned it into high fructose corn syrup. And underlying it is like, oh no, we don't have enough food. We have to keep producing more. And nobody wants to produce less. I've never really heard an argument that we should produce less food, but I have heard arguments, and I've seen them historically, where it's about, well, it's not just the production, it's the distribution. Like, how do you get it from point A to point B? Think of like current examples, but uh, and I mean this in the most. It's not possible to be non-political about it, but I think of like people starving in Gaza. Whatever somebody's view of it is, like that's not because we don't have enough food. It's because the distribution of the food is being prevented from getting where it needs to be. People in South Asia or India or Bangladesh, famous for famines, especially in the early 70s, there were famines. These were the result of like colonial power structures that kept food from getting to the people that need it. It wasn't because they didn't know how to farm. So it's I'm giving it a very quick answer, although it feels like I'm going on at length. It's
Yeah, I
still a
think
very
it's
short
great.
answer for such a big question.
Yeah. Another thought, but because you said, okay, have created this system that is 150 years in the making, and I wonder because the system now is we have all also a lot of things we used to do, like I mean, getting food, like even maybe in the agrarian part of the history where there were farmers were closer. So in the past, I guess there were communities that were smaller, and these communities were nodes where people produce food, people produce, I don't know, maybe clothing, and these were I mean, faster to get it, and with the more nutrition and more holistic, I don't know, products. And but now we are in this society where I mean, I we are not close to farms. We are not people. There are less farmers, so this is and I understand. Guess this is because this is where these big corporations come, because okay, we are having the solution of we are trying to solve this problem because people are not creating now. I mean, you don't have a farm in the at the corner of your house, so
Right.
the question is this also a solution they are offering that cannot be? I mean, there is a problem that they are solving a problem.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes,
what
yes,
is the
you're right.
alternative of that solution? I mean, the solution. Alternative solution is one solution is big corporations distribute this for everybody, or we have again small clusters of farmers. Is that possible?
Yeah. I think there's a middle ground that I think is more plausible. One of the worries talking about these issues is that people will think it's an either or. It's either like big ag or small ag. Like it's just two options. It's either the biggest thing possible or the smallest thing possible. And my understanding is that, historically, culturally, we're beyond that in the large industrialized nations. Like it's not like we're going back
Yeah.
to when we were all small farmers, which wasn't a really good living. That was not fun or
Yeah.
easy, and also not equitable. It's not like it was glorious and wonderful before industrialization. So the question isn't like industrial is bad, therefore non-industrial is awesome. It's the problems of industrial systems, of big ag, could be mitigated, or we could reduce them by finding different models that are somewhere between a 1 acre farm and a 1,000 acre farm. So you can think of regional food systems, you can think of cooperatives, you can think of collaborative models, you can think of like not so much a garden in your house, but like community gardens in cities. There's a book that just came out 2 days ago called Tiny Gardens Everywhere. Um, and it's a historian, Kate Brown, who's at MIT, and I find it to be a wonderful book. She does a both of a history and a survey of like the community gardens, urban agriculture, urban farms, and how people have used marginal spaces throughout the modern era to grow food, and do so in ways that are phenomenally productive, like the efficiency and the health of the land that they recover. But her argument isn't like, how are we going to feed the world? Let's all have tiny gardens. She's asking a different question. It's like, how are we going to build thriving communities so
Yes.
that people can make decisions about gaining food? Like that comes first, like that political level. Like, how do you build thriving communities? And then it's possible for you and I to engage in policy reform or think about, maybe larger, maybe it's the 50-acre farms or 100-acre farms that can be outside cities, or that can be in you know close enough to your region, as opposed to 10,000-acre farms in the Midwest of the United States, or cutting down the Amazon or something like that. And I find that very compelling to think about the regional scale. Some people have called it an agriculture of the middle, so that it's not so much the two-person 5 acre farm, but it's the 20 people, 25 people working on 100, 200, 300 acre farm. That's plausible. Like you can control that, you can manage it, and if the reform also includes finance structures, so that the subsidies which are otherwise going to the big ag companies could instead go to some of these mid-sized farms, then I think there's a possibility that we're starting to feed people region by region. Um, there's a there's a project, I should check in on it to see how it's going. There's a project in New England, the states in New England in the U.S., which is I think 6 states, called 50 by 60, and they want to provide 50% of their food from their region by 2060. So the goal isn't 100% of food. Like we're never going to get sugar or coffee from New England. It doesn't, you're just not going to happen. But instead of like 2% of their food or 5%, you could have 50%. And I think that's a good direction to go. And that's just one that I happen to be familiar with, but I think there's models like that all over the United States. I'm giving a lot of US
Yeah.
based examples just because I'm more familiar with those. But there's no way that the US is unique in this. In fact, we might be behind compared to so many countries across the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is totally interesting because this is also a case kind of against globalization because with globalization, we have
Mm.
basically decided to say, okay, this country will produce canola oil or will produce soy, and then we import it, and then I guess, I mean, the argument you're making is less. I mean, I agree with you with the idea of communities because once you have a community, you have power, or I mean, you have power to take decisions that affect your life directly. I mean, food. I mean, you can decide, okay, this farm is here, what we can do with food instead of, okay, I have these health problems, I have to use supplements, and trying to manage isolated problems that you don't know how to tackle, that might be solved already in a
Right.
farm with this food. But um, but I wonder, okay, so one idea I get what I probably understand is one idea is break down these big companies or big disaggregate it to make it closer to the communities, to the cities, or to the communities. And the second thing would be, I guess, try to make it more local instead to globalize.
Yeah, maybe um, I'll preface my comment by saying we would have to work on policy reform to achieve what I'm about to say, but that ag of the middle is also like policy of of the middle where um, we can, I think we'll still have some global companies that are providing certain grains or certain sugar or certain coffee or certain plants. Like some of those might best be achieved by a large global company. Like I think of like wheat, um, like the Midwestern, they're really good at, these companies are really good at growing wheat. And I don't know that we want to lose that, but it needs to be in balance with like what happens with that wheat and who has a chance. So it's almost like part of the reform is how do we match together which elements of our food system are best suited from large global companies, and which ones are best suited for perhaps regional, smaller. And to me, it's like tendencies. So as opposed, instead of being an absolute, it's like you can lean towards smaller or you can lean towards larger, but it's always going to be a push and pull. I'm always a little hesitant, and I kind of shirk or pull back a little when I read articles that are like, local is a solution for everything, because then it's, there's so many political questions like, well, I don't know if you live in a small town, like I've lived in a small town, and it's not like I like everybody or everybody gets along. People make bad decisions in small towns too. It's not some like beautiful idyllic space just because it's small. Like it's just as problematic, or I would say it has problems too. So like just saying, hey, let's just get rid of all global connections and everybody return and shrink down to small. Um, I find it hard to envision that as a good thing for the future, like for my kids or for my grandkids. But at the same time, the opposite of that I also find difficult, which is like, don't worry at all about local control. Don't worry at all about regional possibility. Don't worry at all about building like democratic interactions, in across, say, like a three-state region in the US or a three-state region in Mexico. Don't worry about that at all because it's all going to be big and global. Like I mean, that's probably worse than the other tendency, but I, I'm speaking too broadly now, but I just think that the extreme of both of those tendencies is
Yeah,
bad, and the trend for the last 100 years has been moving towards the extreme of
yeah,
large as opposed to the extreme of moderated or controllable.
yeah. One of the things that I mean, big agriculture has produced is the loss of nutrients, but along that lines, it's been also a loss of species because as I mean, we can talk a little bit about these modified crops, genetically modified crops, but I guess this is part of the question as well. Like, um, since big agriculture have changed the crops, first there are new kind of seeds, the new kind of species that have these problems. But on the other hand, they have species that used to be used in the past with more nutrients, with more I don't know, vitamins, you would say, and there has been loss. I saw actually in a documentary as well that there was an initiative in France to preserve these seeds. Yeah, so I guess another point would be to try to preserve that and revert that. I guess.
Right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's I mean, these are good questions. This is really interesting. Like, I have a student who's a senior in college. She's doing a thesis on seed systems, and she's trying to understand kind of what we're talking about. Like, she works with local seed savers who like share seeds year after year, and she has worked with some indigenous communities and some of the native nations around where we are, and how they save and perpetuate their seed stock so that they have a more biodiverse array. Like biodiversity is good. And she's also like looking into how does, companies like Syngenta or Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer, like that's the big one, like say the biggest, the big. So it's like the small one and then the huge one. Like, what are they doing to the seed stock? And they're reducing the biodiversity. Your point, like, um, it's more efficient. You can grow more, you can produce more food, but you've reduced the biodiversity. So it's a short-term gain with a long-term environmental problem. And I think to your interest, like long-term health issues. I also think it goes back to the prior what we talked about in the
Yeah.
prior question, where this isn't a concern for the companies because there's a technological fix. You just like build the nutrients into the next seed. You just like add it in. You I know this example seems to come up a lot, but people like to talk about golden
Yes.
rice. You encountered golden, yeah. And it seems like it's a sensible thing too. Like golden rice is, hey, we have vitamin A deficiency. And I know that they've been doing a lot of this in the Philippines and other South Asian countries. We have vitamin A deficiency. So we will genetically modify the seed so that we put the vitamin A into the seed. And it's like, well, that's pretty clever. Like medicine inside the actual thing. We're adding the nutrients in. Um, the But you could do like there was a project in the Philippines where they said, well, why do we have vitamin A deficiency? It's not just, oh no, our kids don't have enough vitamin A. They said, why don't we have vitamin A? And part of it was because they reduced this diversified growing
Mm.
regime. Like all the rice doesn't usually have vitamin A. That's not a vitamin that's in rice. But there's lots of crops that do. And so they had projects where they planted all the other crops that do have vitamin A and brought it into the diet, and it increased vitamin A levels, and it solved the same problem. It was more of an ecological solution. So it maintained biodiversity. It asked for more, locally relevant crop planting regimes. But maybe it's a little, it's more holistic as opposed to the just come up with golden rice and it's like a one-stop shop, like one-stop solution. But then you're kind of under the thumb of the big seed companies. You don't have any control, you don't have any say, and you didn't really fix the problem. You just like skipped over
Yeah.
addressing why it was a problem in the first place. I think for the health questions, if you can like take one step back, it's like why is this a problem in the first place? Which is like what the Balfour and Rodale and Albert Howard were doing, like with healthy soil. Is we got to make healthy soil. That's the issue.
Yeah.
Then you'll have healthy food. Then you'll have healthy people. The genetic modifications, like skip all that. You don't have to worry about any of that. We'll just short circuit it, or I don't know what the metaphor is, or leapfrog it, go over
Yeah.
it,
To share life.
and fix it. Yeah,
Yeah, I have a question about
yeah.
so from your research, historical research. So you're saying that the problem with vitamin A was that they were not ingesting more variety of crops, or that the variety of crops in the soil were providing more nutrients to the rice.
They were they changed the kind of crops that they grew so that they become more centralized around rice. And once they did that, their diet was less
Ah, okay.
diverse. And because their diet was less diverse, they no longer had the health from vitamin A. Um, and so instead of making a more diverse diet, they just added the vitamin A to the
Ah,
rice.
okay. That's it.
And rice is a more of an export crop too. So like it's more of a commodity. You can sell it. It's more of a corporate profit structure. So it made sense to them. It was like, well, hey, we're making money selling rice. We're not making money selling diversified vegetables. That's not a big money maker.
Yes.
So to them, it was like, hey, we'll make a lot of money and we'll solve this vitamin A problem that we just caused.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
I feel this, yeah, I feel bad because like each answer I end up saying too quickly what is a more complicated thing, and I always fear that I'm reducing a more complex thing. So that was a short
No,
version
I
of a
understand.
longer
It's a
story.
complex topic because I mean, there are a lot of um, actors that are trying to also, because they have different interests. Because one would say, oh, there are only big producers, but I understand that also small producers are maybe to compete with the big producers are also using fertilizers and these are basically
Yeah.
changing the soil so they can compete. And yeah, I think this is a complex problem because it becomes then uh, yeah, a competition about money and not about this complex topic about nutrition. So the idea is that in the past, I mean, it makes sense that people used to eat a more diverse diet, but also because they, I guess, thought about the different. climates. I mean, different stations, and then this changed the type of food they can harvest. Um, um, I want to also get a little bit more in deep with the idea you said about these philosophies that are behind this. I mean, because for one side there are the actors, and the other side are the philosophies are changing as well. Because uh, the small farmer had this idea. Okay, I will produce this. I know the soil. I'm in contact with the soil. I know what is more, I don't know, more healthy, I guess. But now they are changing the philosophies or about how we can make more money, how can I compete. And one thing that I think find interesting is in your book, Pure Alteration, is that the idea of, okay, in the past it was natural versus unnatural, and now is pure versus impure.
Yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about how
yeah,
philosophy has changed as well?
yeah. Part of it is, I think, a tricky part of like the history of science, so that there's different kinds of sciences, and we get like a large, like agricultural science, which is built by the state actors, institutions, federal government, promoting research and experimentation um, under the rubric or under the umbrella of we want to build up our food system, so we need to do more scientific experimentation. Because of that, sometimes there's a misperception that if you want to work outside that system, if you understand the soil because you've been a farmer for 3 generations, 5 generations, 10 generations, that then you're not scientific. Like it's a argument between like we're either going to do it the scientific modern way, or it's the non-scientific old way. And there's different kinds of knowledge. There's, experiential knowledge is very important and very meaningful, but it's hard to write down. And so it comes across as resistant to new science, when in many cases, historically, and the philosophy here was it's not resistance to new knowledge, it's resistance to control over how I learn and do things. And so there's a kind of economic philosophy which is promoting the more scientific, industrial, technical aspects of like how to grow food and why to grow food. And then that doesn't come from nowhere. The story in Pure Adulteration is partly a story of when people move into the city, when you have urbanization, you move off the land, then you just don't have as many farmers. And so you have to find new ways to grow more food with fewer farmers. And it changes the equation of why you're growing the food. So you want to create more, higher quantity, a bigger yield, a bigger harvest, because you just don't have as many people. And that philosophy is, I mean, I've written, and I know others have too. The danger is not so much that it's scientific, it's that it's scientistic. And what I mean is that it assumes that a certain kind of institutional science is the only thing that matters and nothing else matters. And it's not so much that it's technological, it's that it's technocratic, which means it's not that it involves technological development. It means that for a technocrat, nothing else matters but the technical aspects. It's only mechanical. It's only about efficiency. It's only like technical values are like the values of a machine. It's efficient. It's productive. It's powerful. It's uniform. It's standardized. Like these are all technocratic values. They're not humanistic, because humans are messy and they can't. Efficiency is a tricky thing. So the philosophy that grows is more one, I think, between a more technocratic view and a more humanistic view, and we kind of lose the humanistic aspects. Um, you just think like even up to today, to this moment, where that phrasing, that philosophical difference I just noted, is like every day in our news about AI or um, like it's like, what does it mean to be human? It's like, well, the machine will take care of it. Like it's this technocratic thing, like the AI will do it for you. It's like, but we're losing who we are as people. Like, what about creativity? What about art? What about ideas? Can intelligence really be artificially produced? Like that's our current version of that same technocratic, humanistic contrast that you see happening in environmental spaces, in how we produce energy and how we produce food and how we manage our space, um, coming out of arguments. I'm extending beyond, but like coming out of arguments of a new industrial food system, late 1800s, early 1900s. And because of that shift in philosophy, it does lead to people asking, instead of like, is it natural? Then they say, well, we just want to know if it's pure. Is it actually what we said it was? Like when I put a label on a food, is the food actually what I said on the label? Then thumbs up, everything's good. And you don't ask at all. It's like, well, how did the food get in the can? Like, how did it get to the store? Like, who grew it? Like, none of that's really part of it anymore. It's just like, well, it says here on the label that it's A, B, and C, and I can confirm it's purely A, B, and C. So let's go. Everything's good. That's a different way to understand what food is, just based on the label or just based on the store. Then I don't know. It's an agricultural process. It goes back to the soil. It's about like ecosystems and biodiversity and you know nutrition in the soil and the health of the air and the health of the water and the kind of treatment that you do as a farmer to till the land, stuff like that. None of that matters if all it is like, what does it say on this label on the can at the store?
Yeah. So, I mean, you were already touching on the point of AI, but I know you have reading as well about robotics and AI. And I guess you would have a little bit of a pessimistic view of the future of AI. I mean, I hope is can
Yeah,
solve the problem, for example, of distribution that maybe we can use to our advantage,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
or maybe also maybe. I mean, I hope both AI and robotics can help us to achieve what you said, because I thought that the future will be better if we are not so much centralized. But now that I hear your argument about this blended system of medium size, I think
Yeah.
makes sense. But can you tell me your thoughts about future robotics and AI?
Yeah. Yeah. Part of my concern about AI, and I think you're touching on an article I had in Slate about the future of farming never includes farmers, and I find that weird. Um, uh, Part of it is a concern of I've seen all this before. It's like the same argument. It was, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. They're like, "Hey, we've got these new machines," and then everybody said, "Oh my God, machines are going to solve all our problems." And then, the 1940s, 1950s, like, hey, we just invented nuclear energy. And everybody's like, oh my God, nuclear is going to solve all our problems. And then you get into the 70s and the 80s, like, now we've genetically modified things. It's like, oh my God, genetics are going to solve all our problems. And each time it doesn't. And now we're up to like, oh my God, precision agriculture, AI, robotic driven agriculture is going to solve our problems. And part of my concern was like, this is a very present centered argument. Like, it's just the new version of the same thing. But I think what you're adding on to it is a pretty interesting point. And maybe I hadn't thought through it as much. Where, in what ways can we build like a more moderated, um, mid-scale digital systems to help? Like, in what ways is that possible to help with distribution? Like, it seems the future is gonna have more digital robotic things than the past. Like, that's gonna happen. Historian's job is not to predict, but that one seems like a pretty easy guess. Like, we're not going to have less, we're going to have more. So then it becomes a political economic problem. Like, well, who's going to control it? Like, under which economic model? If it's just hyper consumer capitalist, then it doesn't return benefits to like the user. It's people will just keep making more robotic machines, precision agriculture they call it, for the sake of gaining more profit from the farmers. And then the small farmers can't afford this stuff; it's too expensive. So then you have fewer small farmers and more big farmers, and that's a story that we've seen over and over and over. I was Before we logged on, I was reading about a contrast in two things, and maybe this fits here. Um, there we had a program that started during the pandemic here in the US, which was called a local Food Purchase Agreement, LFPA. It was a USDA, like a federal agency, Joe Biden era model that was directing the funds from the USDA to localized groups so that it could support the small farmers and provide infrastructure for um, cooperatives and community supported agriculture models. And in the area I live in, I think they got I'll double check these stats, but I think I have this right. It was $1.9 million went into our area. It's called the Lehigh Valley. And that ended up supporting over 40 farmers and 40 farm families, which isn't just 40 individuals. It's like the farmers and the packers and the distributors and the salespeople. And that led to over $2 million, 2 million pounds of food production, which led to, I think, 1.8 million meals. So like that's substantial. Like $1.9 million brought 1.8 million meals, which is a pretty good return, $1 a meal for like actual people. And so if you say, well, all right, that's 3 meals a day, so it's like 600,000. If you divide it by three, it's like, well, that's not nothing. Like that's pretty good. Um, but the new administration, among its many belligerently hostile, terrible things, like just cut the whole program last year. Elon Musk's Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, they just cut it and took it back. They diverted that money. They said, we're not going to give you the whole program nationally was, I think, 420 million, maybe close to 500 million. Maybe that was only part of it. It could have been 700 million. But it was like, no, this is a waste of money. We're not going to do it. We're going to take it back. So like when taxpayers aren't using that money to go to the local food system, instead it's going to, the Department of Homeland Security. It's going to ICE. It's going to tax cuts. So it's not like we can't do it. It's that the political choice to not direct taxpayer funds to one or the other isn't going the right place. So at the same time that happens, if you add I think, different components, it's close to 700 million. Um, the counterbalance to that was there was a company, and forgetting the name of it, it was a vertical farm. It seems like it was Bowery. I have all my tabs open, but I don't want to click around on the computer at the moment. It was a vertical farm, like indoor farming startup company, so that you could grow food like with artificial lights, and it's very efficient and it doesn't take up land, and you can just grow up instead of out. So, I mean, it's like we don't have much room, so it makes sense. Um, it's very technically, technocratically devised. It's all about efficiency. That's the main thing. The local food purchase agreement was all about community and like building up local families, local farms, local lands. The vertical farm startup was all about technical efficiency. We just need to grow as much food as we can in as little space. And it got a lot of venture capitalist investment. It was like a private effort. It wasn't taxpayer funded, although I'm sure there was some. Apparently, it had a lot of celebrities invested in it too. And I think it was over $700 million invested in this company, which went completely bankrupt. Didn't work. They had to liquidate and sell. And you're like, that's $700 million. Like, we could run the whole USDA program. Instead, you just flush that money down the toilet. And then at the end of the day, you're like, you just can't feed people on these regional models. It just doesn't work. It's not efficient. Like, but it was so much more efficient to do it that way than to waste all your venture capitalist, like startup Silicon Valley money on a high tech, like highly automated, robotic, like precision agriculture, AI built vertical farm system. And I know that's just one example, but I think it's telling that it's not so much questions about food or health, it's just questions about politics and economics. Like that's a privatized, you know, technically proficient model, and it didn't work. The other one was like publicly funded and community based, and it was working. It didn't solve everything. It's not going to feed the world that way, but it was feeding, 1.8 million more meals than we would have had. And I think that it's worth thinking about structuring our politics to build more of those community-based models so that we can kind of have arguments about now where does the AI fit inside the community-based model? Like let the community organizations and the regional organizations have control of it. then work with engineers, then work with tech companies and find out how they fit inside the community-based models instead of no community-based models. Let's just let the tech companies do it on their own.
Yeah, I mean, a part of this is, I mean, what you say, it is the philosophy. Um, there's something interesting. I always remember when I have this kind of conversation about philosophies of the 21st century and the future. I study, have a media study in my master because I study media, and my one of my professor he wrote a book and an article that he was. I'm telling from the point of view of media that in the last 100 years there were too many dystopian medias coming up. Like there were a crisis of utopias, and because movies, comics, and different medias were portraying a lot of dystopias, but not much utopias. And I think that's also the problem. Like the takeover of the hyper capitalism is also what is the alternative. And when I see, for example, solar energy, that you can basically create your own energy, your home, it seems to be becoming cheaper by the day. I feel like, okay, if we can have a future where there is sustainability more, I mean, that can help also the environment in the future, because will be a climate crisis. And then we can have this blended model that you propose, and then we can have communities, and AI and robotics can help us to create this distribution system of food. Maybe we have this future and we can propose something for these utopias. Uh, but
Yeah,
I
that's really
yeah, but
interesting.
I it's I mean, I don't know. I feel like when I was reading your articles, there were a lot of I guess more. I mean, for sure, your point of view is the what is the problems, and but I think there are a lot of solutions as well, as you were pointing out. It's not there are not.
Yeah,
It's not that we don't have the tools. It seems.
yeah. I think we can do this. Like I teach at a small college, but I teach engineers. Like I'm in the engineering division, so I'm a historian, but I'm teaching engineers. So it's about like how do you come up with new solutions or how do you think about design? And almost most of what we're teaching is it's not only the like what do you come up with, but like who do you talk to, who gets a say, like within which political system are you developing this design? And it means that our engineers have to spend more time, including like computer engineers, all engineers, you spend more time working with and understanding community-based values so that their designs grow from that basis instead of being like dropped down on them, it grows up from them. And I think, I mean, that's a career length argument. Like I have to keep talking like year after year, class after class, like ways of thinking. It's all for me. It's always it really is philosophical issues, like ways of thinking. How are we going to think about this? And don't just skip over the, I don't know, deliberating about how we think about it. Like you have to do that first, and then we'll come up with the solutions. Because I think we can do it. Like people are pretty smart. Like there's a lot of ideas, and it's gonna involve like large language models and precision agriculture and robotics, but under whose control? Like who will have a say? Will it take over, or will you be able to control and direct it? I think they're political, philosophical problems.
Yeah, and
Sometimes people get really frustrated with me because that's so large and it just sounds like lofty,
no,
like
it
you're just
makes
throwing your
sense.
hands like, look at this big, just solve philosophy.
No, I mean it makes sense because I mean I don't think it's an issue. Also, I mean I don't think the problem. I mean the problem of food is just one aspect of hyper capitalism, hyper science. I mean analyzing everything from the scientific point of view and avoiding that from, I don't know, soul or nature in the past. I mean there are problems with religion, and there are problems with that part that also can become problematic. But I think for sure this the evaluating the humans and nature and everything like machines, I don't think have help us to have better lives. But
Right.
on that note, I want to also, you have written about how this. philosophies and the systems have been exported from big countries to small countries, and that's also interesting for me because I mean I'm from Ecuador. I live in Germany, but I mean I understand that here in Germany, or as I live, the communities are more fractured, and that's something that I try to kind of emphasize when I do the podcast. It's like there are some things in Latin America that, as it's been industrialized, there are still some communities. People are more close to each other, and I think there is. I try to make the argument that there are positive things that in the countries that are not industrialized that need to be uh, spoken about and that has to be thought about because I mean, as much as the system of in the big countries have helped to solve some issues, there are also problems. Yeah, I don't know if you have an ideas about this. I mean, you're already good about this.
Yeah, I I can give this kind of as my final thoughts. I do have to. This is a really good conversation. I'm sorry that
No problem. Yeah.
I have to go so soon. Um, I wonder about that a lot too, like the big historical shift. Like I'm talking about like how food's changed in 100 years, 150 years. But just think of like global politics, like which nations have been most influential and in the sway and the influence of the United States. Um, and things like the Green Revolution and the Rockefeller Foundation and the USDA and USAID, which has now been destroyed. um, those had a time, like that was a 50, 75 year period that's now kind of behind us. And so what comes next, or who's going to come next? And it's possible that things can be better if the sway of the United States isn't as massive, like that influence isn't as overwhelming. um, as someone from the US, I don't want there to be no influence, but I think maybe it's the same thing of like too much
Hmm.
is not good. None is not good, but too much is not good. So I don't know where that blend comes. I know our current political moment is like a retrenchment, like it was everything. We're going to control the world to like now we're not going to do anything. We're just going to gut USAID and not have any support. Um, but I would be interested to learn more, to hear more, and to read more about how cross cultural, cross national influence will matter for food systems as we go forward. Will countries be able to recover and maintain their food traditions in
Yes.
ways that have been eroded from global influence? Who's in charge of that? Because countries don't stay the same. Cultures aren't static either. We all evolve, but I think we're not naive enough to think that there's not. I mean, there's truly, you know, cultural traditions that really matter and that are very old and are very meaningful and should be and can be preserved. And food systems are right in the middle of that, like food cultures. So I don't really have a good answer, but you've got me. Now I want to think more about that.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking the time to replying to my questions and were answering.
Yeah, thanks for talking. This is really
Yeah,
enjoyable.
I'm also enjoyed talking to you. Yeah, so thank you for everybody for listening, and see you on next one.
Okay, thank you.